Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of 5 Minutes to Better Home Services Marketing, where I break down data from our weekly Substacks at thedatadriventrades.substack.com, where we provide insights, data, benchmarks, trends across various marketing tools, operational inefficiencies, and we help to turn that data into actionable insight that affects the bottom line of your business. So each week I publish about a different channel, pay-per-click, organic, Google LSAs, and then this week we're talking about outbound campaigns from Chiirp. So for those of you that know, Chiirp and Searchlight are partnered. We provide revenue analytics where we use our data platform to connect the dots and help to show what customers is Chiirp directly influencing toward revenue. So that's the data that I'm going to be covering this week, and I've got June updated. But before I get into that, I just want to talk about May's performance so we get a little bit of that monthly trend so we see the direction of how things are going. So in May, Chiirp outbound campaigns had a 6.72% response rate. So sending messages typically via text, what percentage of those customers are actually responding to those messages? What was the total revenue opportunity generated by location in this sample of businesses, which for May was around 115 different businesses? We're able to get $443,478 of total revenue opportunity. So that's going to be unsold estimates, sold jobs, and closed jobs from net new bookings directly influenced by Chiirp. Chiirp also generated $275,337 of closed revenue per location. So I'm going to pause here. These are really big numbers. So when we look at channels like PPC, organic, Facebook, Bing, LSA, we have a decision to make. Do we want to go for volume? Is volume even available? Or do we want to go for maximum ROAS? Most of you are going to say, I want a balance. I want to find a ROAS where I feel very comfortably profitable, but not so much so that I'm missing volume opportunities. Because would you rather have $10,000 generated from something like PPC at 25x ROAS, or would you rather have $100,000 generated in a month for maybe a 5.5x ROAS? Most people will choose the latter. When it comes to a tool like Chiirp, when it comes to a mechanism to engage your customers, because that's ultimately what we're doing. Any type of marketing is just getting in front of the right people at the right time with the right message. That's the fundamentals. The technology changes around that, and Chiirp is an example of that. But ultimately, it's another marketing channel. It's a phone. It's digital real estate. It is attention. Where can I get my customers' attention? So for something like Chiirp, I'm not surprised that it generates such a significant amount of revenue opportunity because these are customers who have already engaged with you. They're already in your sales pipeline. So we already have that going for us, and the audience is typically a lot larger. And when it comes to an ROI, we had $31.6 million of revenue generated across 115 businesses from Chiirp. So the estimated ROI based on Chiirp costs, things like that, it's about a 316x. You don't find that anywhere else. Outbounding is one of the most exponential returns that I think that you're going to get. Now, it needs to be part of a holistic strategy, but let's dive in a little bit to June, and I'll talk about what that means. When I talk about a holistic strategy, how are we thinking about this? Because in June, the audience size, now the sample's bigger, 140 businesses. The audience size was about 100,000 people less. So in May, there was an audience size of 460,000 customers, whereas in May, that's 373,000. Again, across 140 businesses, we're not saying it's one business with 373,000 as the size of an audience, but we've got some large contractors in here. So what does that do? What does a smaller targeted audience do for performance? So response rates increase by 30%. So that's interesting. This is month over month data. So from May to June, despite the audience decrease, response rates increased by a whopping 30% to an 8.78 response rate. 32,800 customers responded to outbound messages, and just over 21,000 net new jobs were booked, which was also higher than May. So we had a smaller audience than May, but we had more responses and more net new book jobs. And here I've got a nice chart where you can see book jobs steadily climbing throughout the year. So over the course of the year, the sample size for us has gotten bigger and bigger. So that's part of this trend. But overall, we've seen since March a staggering increase. So During the slow season, Chiirp was very effective. When demand was low across other channels, this is why I talk about looking at your marketing holistically. PPC, organic, LSA, down. And people were panicking. But Chiirp was doing really well, generating 6 figures of closed revenue per business in these samples to make up for that. So that was the internal demand for that existing customer list versus trying to channel the external demand. So that has continued into the summer months. I personally thought summer demand is going to go up. Outbound campaigns won't have as much of an impact. But in fact, when demand has gone up from those external marketing channels, that nets a bigger list typically of unsold estimates, customers in your sales funnel. So by combining the two with outbound campaigns, now you have these targeted follow-ups, right audience, right message, right time. We've doubled, quadrupled the amount of revenue opportunity Chiirp is generating per business. I talk about how in this Substack, audience is really important. Holistic strategies are really important. You've got to look at all of your marketing channels. How are they performing? Volume, ROAS, operations, book rate, match rate, paying customer rate. And then how are you following up with those customers? That's the outbounding piece. Now, just because the audience was smaller in June and has performed better does not mean it's a race to the bottom to create the smallest possible audience. You don't necessarily need to give every customer an individualized message, although I am sure in the future with AI that is going to happen. You don't need to keep cutting. You're going to have customer cohorts that exhibit some of the same behaviors. Maybe they're an unsold estimate. Maybe they're a specific type of equipment that you want to send a message to them that feels more specific. But it's not a race to the bottom for the audience. You don't want to cut the audience so low, because we have seen it, some brands in this sample, when the audience size is too low, it tends to underperform. There is a balance here, and that's really important to keep in mind. Something else to note, since February of this year, booked jobs from Chiirp outbound campaigns have increased 152%. That's pretty significant. So of the customers who responded to outbound messages, 64% of them booked a job. That's up by from 63% in May, so basically the same. And of those who received a message, though didn't respond but just received it, 5% booked a job, spending $3,205 on average. So with Chiirp, based on this data for June, if you sent 100 customers a message, you could expect 5 of them to book a job, and on average spend $3,205 with your business. Now, again, it's a sample. Every market's going to be different. But these are the benchmarks that we want to share weekly, so that as you start to think about, should I adopt Chiirp? Should I start doing outbound campaigns? Well, what does my audience size look like? Well, based on John's data, again, 140 businesses, that's a pretty good sample size. You know, if I have about 2,000 people I can send a message to, 5% are going to book. On average, they do spend about $3,000. You can do some math to see the impact on your business. That's what we like to get to is data to see the impact on your business. Our CEO, Kevin Lesage, always says marketing is a data problem. So really being able to look at the numbers and formulate what are my desired outcomes and use the math to see if you can get there. For every 1,000 impressions from Chiirp outbound campaigns, an impression is just someone receiving the message, $160,250 was earned, which was up 41% from May. These Chiirp outbound campaigns in June were much more efficient than May. Not to say that May was a poor performer. Hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue opportunity and closed revenue. You can't do much better than that. But for every 1,000 impressions, so again, if you're thinking, okay, I have an audience of 1,000 people, I could expect to earn just over $160,000 based on this pretty robust sample. Maybe you have an audience size of 300 and you're thinking, John, is this even worth it? You can do the math to say, okay, that's about a third of the size, 160 divided by 3. That gets me to $65,000, $70,000. That's absolutely worth it to my business in the context of my monthly revenue targets. So we have a nice little chart here to see how that revenue per 1,000 impressions has evolved over the year. You can see that it bottomed in February and then it's gone up 90% from then until June. So in June, Chiirp outbound campaigns generated $408,968 in revenue opportunity per location. So in May, we had 115 businesses. Now we have 140. So yes, there were more booked customers. Yes, there were more responses. Yes, they spent more, but because we're looking at a pretty decently large sample here, that is why I think the revenue opportunity per location did decrease a little bit, because that denominator is higher. But this is still great. It only decreased $35,000, but we're talking $400,000 of sellable opportunity that Chiirp is re-engaging that could be lost. If you're spending $400 to acquire a paying customer with PPC, and you would know that from the Searchlight Data platform, is it not worth it to make sure that you follow up with those customers using a tool like Chiirp to try to capture more of that revenue? So this also helps to reduce your marketing costs. Again, that goes back to the holistic nature of the way that we view this data. So another important point too is that 70% of that total revenue opportunity converted into sold or closed revenue. Now your average marketing channel is going to be around 40 to 50%. So you're going to close about half of your PPC revenue opportunity, about half of your organic revenue opportunity. With Chiirp, it's much higher. Because again, these are customers who are familiar with your business. They are in your funnel. And then just to cap it off, Chiirp outbound campaigns generated over $250,000 of closed revenue per location in June. That's $57 million in total revenue opportunity across these 140 businesses, and then $35 million in closed revenue across 140 separate businesses. So yes, it's down slightly from May, but you can see this general up and to the right trend of these outbound campaigns. It's up 49% from March to June. When things get busy, customers are going to multiple contractors, getting multiple quotes. If they're doing installs, the best chance you can give yourself after spending the money to acquire those customers into your funnel is it's to do outbounding. It's to do it with the right audience, right message, right time, and then to measure your success, dial it up or down. With the Searchlight dashboard in Chiirp, you can test your audience size. Maybe in May, it's really big. Your business here. In May, the audience is really big. Then you drop it down in June. You see, wow, that was way more efficient. It might change in the fall. And then once you get a year of data, you really start to diagnose and tactically attack this from a data perspective. So thank you so much for listening. I look forward to seeing you all and talking to you all next week.